kids through the menopause transition? And what would you tell, this person in the scenario? And I bet you that most of you know a person with these questions. I tried to make it as relatable as possible. So with no further ado, I guess we will dive right in. So what is menopause, right? I think like sometimes we assume women know, and the truth is that menopause is a single day in time. So you are officially in menopause when it has been 12 full months without a menstrual period. That is assuming, of course, a natural menopause. So, your period's changing over time. That is not the same thing as a surgical menopause where you go into menopause overnight when your ovaries are removed. But let's assume for the sake of just this slide that we're talking about natural menopause. So the average age of that in the United States is 51 years old. However, that varies for many people by, 5 to 7 years on either side. So really, could be anywhere from 45 to 55 with some outliers as well. Now that's the final menstrual period. But what the time leading up to that final menstrual period is actually really where people experience majority of symptoms that we think about when we think about menopause, right? Hot flashes, night sweats, sleeplessness, mood changes. I mean, there's a million, and we'll talk about them too. But the most, the earliest signs are actually starting potentially 8 to 10 years, even before that final period. So if somebody's final period is, let's say, at 48 years old, and they start to experience symptoms 8 to 10 years before that, you're looking at like your late 30s. So this is happening way sooner than most people think it is. And the signs in the beginning are subtle, and we'll talk about what those are in a moment, but I just want to call that out. You move again from early perimenopause to late perimenopause. Periods start to space out. Symptoms get a little more severe sometimes. You have your final menstrual period, and then you're done bleeding. Yay. But now you're officially in your postmenopausal years where most, we will spend a half to a third of our lives. So that's not an insignificant amount of time in a woman's life. And so I think we've always thought of women's health in terms of reproduction and fertility and puberty, but menopause is really important and has some long-term health implications associated with it. So that is oversimplified, but it is the trajectory for most. Now, what are the hormones we're talking about when we're thinking about menopause, right? So we can imagine menopause, and this is something I say to my patients all the time, as reverse puberty. So, we teach our girls about puberty. We don't teach our women about menopause. And so it's the loss of these three hormones you see up here over the course of time. So the first hormone that starts to dip during perimenopause is actually progesterone. Our estrogen levels are still where they should be, or sometimes even higher, honestly. But then progesterone starts to fall. Loss of progesterone will show up as periods that are getting closer together. So maybe your periods were every 28 days like clockwork, and all of a sudden it's 25 days. Maybe your periods are heavier, so you're having heavier bleeding. Maybe you're waking up at 3 a.m. when you used to sleep through the night all the time. Maybe you're experiencing anxiety in ways that, is different than you were experiencing that before, or depression. These are, sleeplessness, mood changes, and I think changes in cycle are, the most common, but of course this can present a lot of ways. That loss of progesterone, continues. And then as you can see on this graph, eventually estrogen starts to decline. And that's when all the fun begins, right? Because it's not a nice decline, it's an erratic decline. So it's like taking a ball and throwing it down a hill in San Francisco. It's bouncing, it's fluctuating, and it's dropping all at the same time. And that in the body, you all are all nurses, the body likes homeostasis and equilibrium. And this is the opposite of that, right? This is just mass chaos. And for many women, that presents as really troublesome symptoms. And women often tell us that they don't feel like themselves, that, they're not sure what's going on in their bodies, either the way you look or the way you feel. And so, eventually all the, estrogen and progesterone both kind of, calm down, everything sort of settles into this new state. And you can see that in the furthest part of this graph, hormones are now steady, but they are low. And that steady but low state is where we will spend the rest of our lives. And you now may not be experiencing the acute symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, but you might now be thinking more about what are the long-term health implications associated with living with low estrogen. So the other hormone on this graph that I always call out as a sexual medicine provider is testosterone. It is a very important female hormone, not just for sexual health, but for other aspects of our health as well. It starts to decline much earlier than people think. That actually starts to go down in your 30s before the others do. And, is also remains low, but not zero. So in fact, you will have more testosterone oftentimes than you do estrogen in your postmenopausal years, which is interesting. So I hope that clarifies some of the what's going on in my body. Now, we talked a little bit about what kinds of symptoms exist, but there are absolutely no body parts in which you do not have an estrogen receptor. So the brain is one of the biggest receivers of estrogen. So are our bones, so are vulva and vagina, right? Those are kind of the places that feel it the most acutely. But there are 34 or 35 possible symptoms of menopause. And hopefully for everyone on this call, no one ever has to experience all of them, but 80% of women are going to experience some combination of them. And that can manifest a set of symptoms in one, year. And then just when you think you've got it figured out, all of a sudden those symptoms change and now you have new problems to figure out. And that's why Elektra Health exists, because we get this stuff and we can help you identify what is menopause, what is not menopause, and what to do about it, because this can feel very overwhelming, as one could imagine. And also, not everything is menopause, right? Sometimes things can be other things. Like many times we see thyroid problems masquerading as perimenopause. There are other things that may be underlying, like if you have underlying depression or anxiety or OCD, for instance, that's it's going to still be there. Menopause didn't cause it, but it will be exacerbated by menopause. And so it's this confluence of, stage of life, your past medical history, your lifestyle choices. It all shows up for us in this phase of life. All right. So now that I've painted this picture about what's going to happen, and you're probably all going, oh my goodness, whoa, I'm so overwhelmed, or, maybe you've experienced a lot of these things and you're, going, yeah, that's me. There's so much that you can do about it. And that's, I think, the part of the conversation that we all really need to focus on, because like any change, body change, health change, there's challenges, but there's opportunities as well. And there are lots of things that we can do about perimenopause and menopause. And I just love this slide because, again, this is, a portal to the next phase of your life, which can be absolutely incredible, right? When your bodies and your brain are busy trying to worry about reproducing, you can actually do a lot of amazing things that, you maybe didn't have time for. Maybe you didn't have the energy for it. Maybe, that's not the slide I want. Maybe you, didn't have the money for it. Maybe your kids are out of the house now, and all of a sudden you want to refocus. Maybe you want to start a new career. I mean, there's limitless possibilities, but those things are only available to us if we are, living in vitality, right? That's a word I like to use, because it just means you're thriving, and you can only thrive if you've taken charge, you know what to expect. You are, taking back your health in a lot of ways. And that's going to be different than the way you lived possibly in your 20s and 30s, right? The things you could get away with then, you may not be able to get away with now, but that's okay. You're going to have other gifts that kind of come your way. I like to call them gifts, I guess. So when we think about what can you do, there's sort of three buckets. Everyone, no matter whether you're using hormone therapy or not, needs to adjust their lifestyle and behavioral kind of way of living. That's just the reality of it. Like I said, there's, estrogen is a buffer in the body. It buffers all of our systems. And so without estrogen, everything else is going to need sort of more TLC. And especially during those tumultuous years where estrogen is falling, we really need to be kind and gentle to ourselves and be patient with the process. And a lot of that is bolstered by lifestyle and behavioral changes. We can also, of course, then bring in supplements and other over-the-counter products, which you don't need a prescription for. And at Elektra Health, we are, we follow the North American Menopause Society guidelines, but we also do bring in an element of integrative medicine. Our founding physician is a double board certified OBGYN from Mount Sinai, but also did a fellowship in integrative medicine out in Arizona with Andrew Weil. And so everything we recommend when we talk about supplements and integrative medicine is evidence-based. And we will be straight up with somebody that this might not have great evidence for it, but it also really doesn't have much risk. Or this supplement really is pretty risky, and here's why. Supplements are not medications, but they definitely interact, and you guys all know this as nurses, in the body. They can mess with our other medications we're taking, and they do have real risks and benefits. And so those are important to bring up with your patients. And that's a little bit what we'll get into in the case study at the end of this. And then we're talking about hormone therapy, non-hormonal therapy, prescription options. And these buckets of things can get mixed and matched and levers pulled in different orders depending on what you need and when. So this is, again, oversimplified. Some of this is intuitive, things you guys know as nurses. Some of it, bears reminding. When we think about hot flashes, for instance, right? That is actually a hot flash starts in the brain. It actually, has to do with neuromodulators that are in the hypothalamus, which is like our temperature control center in the brain. And so, we have control over a lot of these things. And a lot of the times, being prepared is part of this. And so if you know that you are going through hot flashes and you're prepared for them, you can be ready with your, diaphragmatic relaxation 4-7-8 breathing. You can ask for fans at your desk. You can, make sure that your diet is rich in phytoestrogens. There's excellent research to show that half a cup of soybeans a day makes, a 30% difference in hot flashes. And so there are actual, ready to go things you can do, non-prescription based, just with lifestyle. Sleep and fatigue. Sleep is just like at the top of the pyramid of like the hierarchy of needs, right? Going back to nursing school. And so if we're not sleeping, and sleep is multifactorial, but it's definitely mediated by hormones. Like we talked about, progesterone, estrogen, they both are calming in the brain and help us to sleep. But there's stress, there's anxiety, there's a lot of other things going on in our life at this point in time. We're taking care of aging parents. We've got kids going to college. We're, potentially breadwinners in our, in our families. And so there's a lot to play with here. But if we can prioritize, if we did nothing else, prioritizing sleep would be probably my number one, because everything will follow. Again, estrogen is leaving our bodies. And when estrogen does that, cortisol can really start to surge on us. And so we want to buffer our cortisol by dedicating, time before bedtime to wind down, an Epsom salt bath, or, something I like to talk with my patients about is they're called binaural beats. So if you wake up at 3 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep, you can actually put these your earphones in, and they're beats that will mimic the brain waves, the brain activity waves that are, prominent when you are in a deep sleep, and it can help you bring you back into that sleep state. Hydration, of course, when it comes to a lot of fatigue has to do with dehydration. And when we're sweating because we're having hot flashes and we're running around and we're stressed out, we can easily get dehydrated during menopause. Exercise, this is something I get asked about a lot. Cardio all day, every day, high intensity interval training 7 days a week. Like, it's not good for us when we're going through perimenopause, especially because your body can really, unless you've been doing it consistently your whole life and it's not new for you, it really can be perceived as a stressful event in the body. Our body's looking for restoration when it's going through this, this period of life. And so focusing more on, yes, getting some cardio, like maybe limiting the cardio to 20 minutes if you're doing cardio, focusing on strength training, low impact exercise. That's actually better for our brain. There's data to show from Lisa Moscone. She talked with us, a couple of years ago about this, that cortisol, too much cortisol actually shrinks the brain. So we want to protect our brains. We need that for the long haul for sure. And with that point, also keto. I think we're all very concerned about waking during menopause, right? And keto diets, women need carbohydrates and our brains need carbohydrates, but they need to be good quality and they need to be in balance, of course, with good quality protein. If we're trying to build muscle mass, we definitely need a lot of protein, but they should, I always say it's better to, you do need some carbohydrates for your brain health. Omega-3 rich fatty acids are super important for our brain, for our heart, for our longevity as well. We, again, need to be kind to ourselves. Refer to, we can't do 14 things at once, anymore. And that's okay. And we just need to sometimes focus on one thing at a time and give ourselves permission to do that. So again, lots to talk about. These are supplements that I generally, on the left-hand side, commonly recommend for the reasons I mentioned before, that they are mostly helpful and very much unlikely to cause harm, right? And so omega-3 fatty acids, almost vitamin D, something that I find most people are deficient in. It's a pro-hormone in the body. It's a building block for hormones. It helps with bones, bone health. It helps with mood, immunity. There's a lot of research going into vitamin D and cognitive health even. And so it's definitely something I recommend. CoQ10, definitely for heart health. Heart disease is the #1 cause of, mortality for women. It is not breast cancer. Heart disease far outweighs breast cancer when we think about what actually, kills women. Magnesium is awesome for sleep and relaxation. There's multiple forms of that. B vitamins, particularly B6 and B12, can be shown to help with hot flashes. Anti-inflammatories are great, like turmeric, and curcumin in the body, green tea, for instance, in moderation, of course. Those are all really kind of, help with inflammation, heart health, brain health, bone health, and mood. Now, of course, people struggle with specific symptoms like sleep. And so oftentimes we will, suggest certain supplements that might be helpful in that regard. And this is something that our Elektra guides do really well. And Shibomi, who is on this call with me, is putting in the chat now, if you guys want to take a look at it, like what are some really great, we have a whole guide around what are awesome supplements for perimenopause and menopause and how to think about supplements. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but hot flashes, phytoestrogens, soy isoflavones, B vitamins, or Swedish flower pollen extract is a great option that's completely non-hormonal for somebody who, maybe has had breast cancer and, doesn't want to even, think about a soy-based product, even though soy has been shown to be safe for women with breast cancer. So again, oversimplified, ashwagandha is great for that cortisol, for that adrenal support and for regulating your sleep-wake patterns. All right, hormone therapy. This is a big topic, can be polarizing, shouldn't be polarizing, but it is definitely, it stems back to what was the Women's Health Initiative study. Some of you may remember that, 20 years ago came out, and it was this gigantic randomized control trial that was not designed how it should have been and was misinterpreted and taken apart by the media and sensationalized, and ended with us believing for many, many decades to come that hormone therapy would give everybody breast cancer and cause heart disease and Alzheimer's, and overnight women and doctors were pulled off their hormone therapy, and it was like in the trash. And I can't, this is a myth that just will not go away, that hormone therapy is, detrimental to health. The truth is that, and these are guidelines that are available on the North American Menopause website, globally available, that hormone therapy taken within 10 years of the final menstrual period and started before the age of 60, generally speaking, the benefits do far outweigh the risks. And so women are often still told that they're not candidates when in fact they might be candidates. It's just really about having the right risk and benefit conversation. The other myth I think is important to call out is that you need to come off of your hormone replacement therapy after you've been on it for a certain number of years. That's just not true. You may wish to reevaluate your dosage. You may wish to take a break and see how you feel. You may wish to kind of, stay on it until, your last breath, if that's what suits you. You do not have to do that. So I think this is, really, there was a gigantic article. You guys may have seen it in the New York Times, last month, just about how, and the title is Women Have Been Misled About Menopause. And it really does a deep dive into this. It's worth a read. And another excellent book that I recommend is called Estrogen Matters by Avram Bluming. And it really goes into like all the benefits that estrogen does have in the body. So it's not a black and white issue. It's nuanced. There's an art and a science to providing hormone therapy to patients. I always look at it as you guys are adults. There's shared decision making. I'm not here to tell you you can't have that. If you decide for yourself and your quality of life that that's a risk you're willing to take for the benefits you perceive to be worth it for you, then by all means, like, why should I not support you in doing that, as long as there's informed, conversation and shared decision making, and we document that, right? And so I don't take that paternalistic view of what women should and shouldn't do with their bodies. All right. So types of hormone therapy, another really important distinction to make. There's a lot of snake oil out there and companies pushing hormones that are supposedly, bioidentical and superior to what you can get, at your local pharmacies. And that's just not true. In fact, the majority of the hormones we prescribe are bioidentical. What does that even mean? Bioidentical just means it is molecularly the same as what your body, your endogenous, your body produced when you were making those hormones. And so we think that those are the safest hormones to use because they're the most recognized by the body. And certainly the majority of the prescribed FDA approved hormones are bioidentical. But what we're talking about, I think also is this term compounding, right? And compounded hormones are hormones that are made in a lab that is outside of, a pharmaceutical industry that is not FDA regulated and therefore really can't be, like guaranteed that it's safe or efficacious. So there's a role for that, of course, when needed, but we always start with FDA approved bioidenticals. Okay. How does menopause show up in the workplace? And I'm, trying to keep on time with you guys. So we could go back and talk about any of this if you guys, are interested in speaking more about these things during Q&A. So I think this is, some of the interesting work that Elektra Health has done over the last couple of years. Last summer, we did a menopause in the workplace survey. We surveyed over 2,000 women, different levels, from C-suite and down, about what was going on with them during the menopause transition and how they felt about that in the workplace and what they wanted to see from their employers. And what we found was that the overwhelming majority of women, 87%, are experiencing at least one menopause symptom in the workplace. And that's probably underreported, to be perfectly honest. And you can see here what those are: hot flashes, fatigue, mood changes, anxiety, the things you would think would be bothersome at work. I think one thing that doesn't show up here, but should also be here probably, is brain fog. And we didn't talk about that. But brain fog is a terrifying symptom that makes people sometimes think that they are going through early dementia, or that they have a brain tumor. In fact, our founding physician has shared openly that she thought, and she's an educated menopause provider, she thought she had something really wrong with her when she was experiencing brain fog. So that is for women who are trying to work at high-level positions, take care of other people like you guys do. This is disruptive. Okay. So here's some more kind of stats about just the importance of us talking about this and about you guys asking for support, or patients asking for support in their place of work. We have support systems for fertility, for smoking cessation programs, postpartum stuff. We have nothing to help women going through menopause in the workplace. And 1 out of every 3 women says menopause negatively affects their performance. A third have missed at least a day of work. 1 out of every 5 women has considered leaving or has already left her job. And that 18% have not pursued a promotion. And that is actually 24% for women of color. We know women of color experience menopause more acutely. It starts earlier. The symptoms last longer. They don't, usually ask for help. And when they do ask for help, they're not usually given the help that they're asking for. And even when they're less likely to even fill those prescriptions. So it is like a layered problem. And the workplace is a place where we can reach women for sure and help them. So we know also that the majority of women want more support. They want that support from their employer. They want it from their insurance companies. And these are things that Elektra is actively working towards, to bring support to people's places of work, and also to work with insurance companies so that you can, for instance, we are partnered with Mass General Brigham and Emblem Health to bring menopause support to their employee base and their insured members. This can look like a lot of different things. It can be as simple as we do a talk like this, through an educational resource like a women's health, support group or something within the workplace, just to sort of get the ball rolling, have the conversation started. It could be that your employer gives you flexible work options. It could be that you have dedicated menopause leave time. It could be, that you get a desk closer to the open window. It could be little things, big things. You can ask for a menopause liaison. It doesn't have to be something from the rooftops, but the more conversation we have around this topic, the more we're going to bring this out of the shadows and make it the real issue that it is, because it's causing women to leave their careers when we need them to stay. So I talked a little bit about like how you guys can help. Again, think about this for yourselves. If it's something you're experiencing personally, think about it for your patients. Think about it for, your places of work. You guys probably, a lot of you work at academic medical centers or big medical centers or small medical centers, right? Where you have benefits. And the majority of nurses, as we all know, are women. And the nursing workforce is an aging workforce. So what does that mean? It just means that a lot of our nurses are, between the ages of 30 and 60. And they're the ones who are, mentoring these nurses coming straight out of nursing school. I mean, this is something that's really important for us to keep, our pipeline, intact. And if we have all of our seasoned nurses leaving because they don't feel well, that's a problem. I mean, nursing already has problems, right, with retention. And so we don't need to add to that because of health issues. You guys work your butts off, you work night shifts, you work, holidays and weekends. And, it's a stressful job to take care of other human beings, and your workplaces should support you as best they can in doing that. So like I mentioned, I hope, this was clear in terms of like the many ways you can ask for support. And if you're unclear or you are interested in finding out more about how to do that, there are some links in the chat where you can, put in your name and have a chat with us, or write down your employer and, we'll contact you and talk more about how we can support you in the workplace. Okay. We would love it too if you personally would join Elektra if you're wanting to learn more about menopause or take charge of your menopause experience, or even, schedule a care visit with one of our menopause providers, such as myself. We're all North American Menopause certified. When you join Elektra Health, you will take an assessment of, kind of where you're coming to us from. You will get a personalized wellness plan. You will meet with your Elektra guide or your menopause doula. And, we get 24/7 digital support. You can text your guide any time of the day, and, they'll get back to you during the, waking hours. You can go through coursework, you can attend an event, with an expert. You can, just be in the community and talk to other women going through and ask questions. Like something pops in your head at 3 a.m. You just put it in the community chat and people will, interact with you there. It's a safe space and it's moderated by our providers. And because you guys are, here today and partnering with Elektra Health at ANA of New York, we wanted to make sure that you got a discount on the, the cost of a membership to the Elektra platform. So you can use code ANA New York. And again, the link is in the chat and we will send it out afterwards. So you guys have, know where to go, but it is electrahealth.com. And then you can see the banner at the top where to go. So lots of ways we can work together, lots of ways to be helped and help others. I hope you guys will consider this as a resource for your patients as well. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I hope it didn't bore you. Does anybody, I don't know if you can come off camera. I don't know if that's even possible, but if you want to come off mute or raise your hand or put a question in the